Lakeland PBS presents Common Ground, brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Production funding of Common Ground is made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Welcome to Common Ground. I'm producer-director Scott Knudsen. In this two-segment episode, Jane Swenson, an artist of the Walker area and member of the Leech Lake Art League, creates a beautiful mosaic from broken ceramic plates. Also, author Richard Lane talks about his life growing up in the Brainerd area and of his book, Richard is a Dreamer.
Name is Jane Swenson, and I am a member of the Leech Lake Art Group, and right now I'm working on a mosaic of a cat to put outside on my garage door. I got two cats. I like cats, so I could have put horses too because I also have horses, but I just decided to do cats. So that's what I do, but whatever strikes my fancy. The subject matter is endless, and I look a lot on the internet, and you get a lot of ideas from that. This is on cement board because it's going to be outside, and otherwise MDF board, use that. Don't use plywood because it warps. So MDF is a better medium to use for that. And then the grout, again, depends on whether it's going to be inside or outside. The grout you use, and then you put a sealer on it. Sometimes they get framed, and sometimes I just do a border with tile. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. You know, you can shape all the pieces with your tools over there, but first I try to see if I could make them fit as they break, and then shape them to fill in the spots that they need to go in. And you can use just about anything to mosaic. These are dishes and tile and stones. I pick up rocks when I'm walking along the trail, and wood and jewelry, beads. I mean, it's just pretty much whatever your imagination is. And then once you get it made, then you grout it, clean it up, and spray a sealer on it. So half the fun is going around to places and getting dishes, buying a plate here, a plate there, because you know you're going to break them. So you want to try to find inexpensive, 50 cents, $1 kind of a thing to do it with. It kind of depends on what you're making and what you like to work with. I have a friend who does mosaics just with wood that turn out really nice. The person that I learned from, Marcia Wolf in Nevis, she's the one that got me started, and she's been doing mosaics forever. She got me started after I retired in 2008. Joined the art league, and then I got over there with her. So she got me started. And so I do a little of this, do a little painting and a little watercolor, and these I'm going to put up there. There's different kind of tools you can use. This one I use a lot. It cuts the best, but there's also a nippers over there for breaking plates. What are you doing, Toby? Yes, I know, you're good. So to use the glue. And when you clean it up, you can wash all this glue that gets on the top. And then I kind of just watch them because they tend to slide a little bit while they're drying, so want them to stay where I put them. So, test. So you can see, you just keep playing around till you find, that ain't gonna work either. Piece that you like. Then if I does it like that, and then I'm trying to get them to fit in the spot. Unless there's something specific, like you're trying to shape a piece to make an ear or a flower petal maybe. But otherwise, it's mainly just trying to get the pieces to fit to make the shape that you're trying to go for, you know, the big picture. And I think mosaics are best looked at from a distance. Like paintings, you're supposed to look at them from 3 feet away. And there's different kinds of glue you can use, but this Well Bond is the most common one that they recommend. And then for when you're putting the grout on, you can have different colors. Black and white are the most common colors, but you can get blue or red or whatever works for the picture. And then once it dries, you clean it all off, get all the film off, and then you spray it, seal it, and that's it. Now you can do mosaics on a lot of different things. Like over there's a bottle that's been mosaiced. You can do statues. I've got a big cat downstairs that I want to mosaic, the whole thing. And the table behind you, I've done that. That's kind of fun. I'd like to do more of that. I found another old iron frame table at one of the secondhand stores, and a friend cut the boards to fit. So I'm going to mosaic that one next. I kind of like to do that. And it has a little more practical use, you know. Don't always know what to do with these things after you've made them. But I do it because I like it. It's fun. And it's all absorbing. When I'm doing it, you know, I'm not thinking about anything else. And that's kind of nice. You get a sense of accomplishment when you finish something. I guess that's the way it is for most of us, especially when you don't have to make a living at it. You can kind of do what you want. It's very concrete. I was a social worker for the county for 40 years, and there was not much of a sense of completion when you're doing social work. But when you're doing this, you know, you've done it and you can see a finished product, and that's kind of nice.
Hi, my name is Dick Lane, and I wrote a book. The name of my book is Richard is a Dreamer. And that came about because when I was in Whittier Grade School in Brainerd, Minnesota, my favorite teacher in the entire world, her name was Miss Lamb. She wrote on my report card one morning, Richard is a dreamer. And I went tearing home to my mother. We were only a half a block away from the Whittier School. And I said, Mom, look what Miss Lamb put on my report card. And she said, she didn't mean it as a compliment. You weren't paying attention in school. And I said, but Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Edison, Eli Whitney, they were all dreamers. And she says, I don't care if they were. You weren't paying attention, and it's not a compliment. But in reality, it was. Because if I hadn't been a dreamer, I would have never got out of the poverty situation that we had. We came from Lake Hubert, where we had no electricity, no running water, a wood-burning stove in the kitchen. My mother had to love my dad an awful lot because we had moved from South Dakota, where they had had 2 restaurants, and moved to Brainerd, and he had bought a lot north of Brainerd on North Long Lake, just on the north side of it. And we lived in an army tent that summer while he built the house. And then immediately he sold it, traded it for a farm in Lake Hubert. And that's the place with the no electricity, no nothing. And we finally came to town. My parents bought this house on the north side. And that's where, at that time, all the doctors and lawyers and judges all lived over there. It was really was the best side of town. But all those people had money, and here we are. We don't have any. We had been wearing clothes made out of feed sacks and flour sacks that my mother made, used clothes, used shoes. The jackets were used. And when we got to town, they were talking about TVs. I had never heard of a TV. And then when we went into the house to look at it for the first time, my brother and I went into the bathroom, and we knew obviously what a sink was, and we could tell that this must be a tub and no more galvanized things like we had in Lake Hubert. But we were looking at this thing that had the tank behind it and a lever. And Dad comes in and he says, "Don't you kids know what this is?" And we just looked at each other dumbfounded. We had no idea what it was. And he reached over and pushed the lever and the water went down. And then he pointed over to a roll of toilet paper that was on the wall. And he says, "No more Montgomery Ward's catalogs. That's toilet paper. That's what you use to wipe your fanny." And that's the start of Brainerd. And I never one time ever felt bad about what everybody else had. All I wanted to do was figure out, how do you get it? And so as time went on, I got a paper route right away. I ended up being the largest Minneapolis morning paper route, and it took double the time that most of them did because it covered a very, very good area of Brainerd. And then I took a canning job at Fairbolt Canning Company, and I was there for a while, and I did something that I shouldn't have done. I knew my mother would like pumpkin pie mix. After all, it cost 8 cents a can back then. And a kid I worked with back in the warehouse part helped me take a case, 24 cans of pumpkin pie mix. Major robbery, but it was the principle of it all that I can't imagine that I did that. But then I took it on a bus all the way up to Brainerd, carried it from the bus depot to the house. Then after about a month, we had a surprise visitor that showed up knocking on our door, 2 gentlemen in suits. And they said, "Is your son Richard Lane here?" And my mom said, "Yes, he is. Could we talk to him?" And so they invited me to go out to their car where they had this old style recording tape player in the middle in this Ford car. And they started asking me questions if I knew certain people out there. And of course, when I was on the way out to their car and they introduced themselves as FBI agents, I was terrified that I'm going to go to jail for stealing a case of pumpkin pie mix that I should have never stolen in the first place. Anyway, they were looking for a guy that stole a car, a really rough guy and 2 of his sidekicks. And they had dropped the car off in Iowa, so then the FBI is involved in it. And so they said, if I hear from him, please give him a call, and they gave me a card and all those good things. And I was so relieved when I got back to the house. I never did tell Mom and Dad that I had stolen that pumpkin pie mix. I've got to go back. When I'm talking about that, I have to talk about my real caper. As a kid in probably the 2nd or 3rd grade at Lake Hubert, we used to go pick pin cherries and choke cherries along the road in front of our home. And one day we're picking all these choke cherries and pin cherries, and I looked over behind me and there's this huge field of watermelon patch. Just all kinds of watermelons. And so I sort of forgot about it, but I thought, boy, someday I'm going to get myself a watermelon there. And so after a while, when I thought about it, my mom was working in the kitchen, and I went up to her and I says, "Mom," I said, "when do watermelons get ripe?" And she says, "Well, why do you want to know?" I said, "I don't know, I'm just wondering. When do watermelons get ripe?" And She says, well, it depends on the weather. I says, well, if it's weather like we have here, when do they get ripe? And she says, well, they're probably ripe. And I thought, wow, I don't dare take a knife from the kitchen because she'll see me do it. So I had to go out to my dad's shed where he kept the grains and all those things. And I snuck on down past the house and down the driveway, and then looked around and snuck into the woods. And I got over there and at the edge of the woods, and I'm looking at this huge watermelon. And I thought, that's the one I gotta have. But this farmer might have a shotgun or something. And so how am I gonna get over there without him seeing me? So I got down and crawled on my hands and knees, and with your arms moving back and forth. But I got to the watermelon that I was looking for, and I cut it loose. And then I thought, how am I going to carry this watermelon and the knife too? So I stabbed the watermelon and carried the watermelon. I got up and I just ran as fast as I could, and I thought, I just can't crawl back there with this watermelon, it's too big. And I got back there, and it really was the best tasting watermelon I had ever had in my entire life. And I just can't imagine that I thought it was okay to do that, but I did it. As time went on, I found that my sisters bent over backwards for me. Betty was my oldest sister, and she became a nurse in Osceola, Iowa, and a very, very smart lady. And my other sister was Dorothy, and Dorothy became our Santa Claus because we didn't have money. And so each year at Christmas time, whatever our big present was that we got, and the one year, the one I remember the most, we got skis and ski boots, the whole works. I mean, just like everybody else seemed to have. And that was Dorothy, and she worked in the Twin Cities. And she had a great job. She was the head of a very large corporation. She was the head bookkeeper. And my cousin, Carl Lane, he told me to keep going to the paper mill. One of the two places were the best two places to go to work if you weren't skilled was the paper mill and the Burlington Northern Railroad. And so at that time it was Northern Pacific Railroad. I kept going there every day, even though the guy kept saying, well, don't come back anymore. You don't need to come back. But I already knew from Carl telling me, just go every day, no matter what they say. And that's what I did. So Paul, when he called me up, he says, if you want to choose, you have to do it this week, because next week we're drafting you and you will have no choice. I thought, oh my God, I don't want to go in the military. What am I going to do? So I went around to the different orders there, and I talked to the different reps, and the Air Force people guaranteed my job. And so I took their test, and I scored perfect on all the tests but one. I missed one question, and there was 4 different categories. So I thought, wow, this is really self-confidence. And the recruiter tried to get me to go into a different field, but I picked air police because I knew my boyhood dream was to be a policeman when I got out. I wasn't going to listen to anything else. That's what I wanted, and I got it. And so I went down, got swore in. While we were waiting for the plane to send us to Texas, I called my mother and told her, well, I'm in the Air Force. And she said, Dick, you won't believe what happened. She said, the paper mill called you this morning, and they want you to come to work tomorrow. So that's how close I came, but they would have still drafted me anyway, so I wouldn't have had a choice. But they made me a squad leader because I was 6'3", and so I was the tallest guy on the flight. And so I was the 4th squad leader because that's how they laid them out. And I didn't want the job because you're going to babysit the other 16 or 18 kids that are in your squad. And so I got all the guys together and I said, I don't want this job. So if any of you want to be squad leader, let's go in and see the TI right now and it'll be yours. I said, I'll stay in the same position, but you'll be the squad leader. And of course, nobody wanted it because it meant every time somebody screwed up, you were going to do 5 push-ups for every gig, or 10, depending on who was ordering them. So anyway, I said, well, all I can tell you is every time I holler jump, you better jump. And so, fire drill, 3 o'clock in the morning. And we're all hustling to get ready because you have less than 10 minutes to get ready. Or you redo it again and again and again. And I look down and I see this guy on the top bunk. And I went down there and I says, Airman, get off that bunk right now. And I can't tell you what he said on the screen here, but you can just imagine what he might have said to me. And he came up like this with his fists. I said, you're the squad leader. Let's go and see the TI right now. And he goes, oh no. He says, I'll listen to you from now on. And he did. But I got a reputation right then as a no-nonsense guy. And when we got all said and done, the last day, they voted me most likely to succeed. So Paul Sibazar called my mother and said, I think Dick is getting out sometime soon from the military, stationed in Duluth. By then, I was working directly under the base commander, and he really liked me. So I went to him and I says, they're hiring 2 policemen in Brainerd, but I have 4 months to go, or almost 4 months, 3.5 months to go. And he had this smirk on his face, and he says, well, Dick, if you get the job, I'll get you out. I know he didn't believe I was going to do that. And I passed higher up than the other person. So I got the job, but for 2 weeks, I was a Brainerd policeman, and I was still in the Air Force, and I had to drive back and forth every day to Duluth. When I was on the police force, one of the things that you do late at night is it's more like security. And I drove by the Eagles Club, and I was checking the back door with a spotlight, and I noticed that the door was jimmied. And so God was watching over me once again, because Kenny Burkness was the other officer in the other squad car, and he was over in Northeast Brainerd having coffee with his wife in the middle of the night, and which is okay. You know, he's in the squad car, he can respond, but it took him an extra few minutes to get over there, and it saved my life because the person that was breaking into the safe had, just like they taught in the academy and in the FBI film things that we saw, where he had a sawed-off shotgun around his neck, a double barrel, buckshot, which is the bigger beads, and a rope that went around his neck. And if I had gone through there immediately and not waited for Kenny, I would have said, halt, put your hands in the air, police. And he would have just swung the shotgun through his arm and blown me to smithereens, double barrel, both of them fired at the same time. With a buckshot, I would be totally dead, for sure, instantly. And instead, he had time, because somehow or another he heard me at that door, probably talking on the radio. And so by the time Kenny got to the front, he was out the front door and gone. And he left the shotgun. I kept that shotgun in my cabinet the whole time until I left the department. The biggest thing is, no matter what you hear from your peers, whoever they might be, in whatever your job is, I was so very fortunate in my life that the jobs I had, including my Air Force jobs and my police job and my real estate world and building houses, were all things that I loved to do. It wasn't like going to work. And do I miss them? I absolutely do. And in addition to that, I was able to do a lot of charity work, helping people out that needed help. I did this book because it was important to me to try to give back to what God has blessed me with. And our society in America, what it's done for me. And if I can help one or two or three or four, or however many people, I don't care what their age is, to start believing that if this guy can do it, with my lack of education, anyway, God has been very, very, very good to me the whole time.
Join us again on Common Ground. If you have an idea for Common Ground in north central Minnesota, email us at legacy@lptv.org or call 218-333-3014. To watch Common Ground online, visit lptv.org and click local shows. To order episodes or segments of Common Ground, call 218-333-3020. Production funding of Common Ground was made possible in part by First National Bank Bemidji, continuing their second century of service to the community. Member FDIC. Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money by the vote of the people, November 4th, 2008. If you watch Common Ground online, consider becoming a member or making a donation at lptv.org.